And it's looking even worse if we check the box office, with an almost 70% week-to-week drop, making it unlikely the movie will cover its production budget and absolutely impossible to ever break even.
And given that the Snow White box office metrics are still not working in Disney's favor and showing no sign of a resolution in sight,
a new and astonishing chapter has emerged in the ever-expanding Snow White controversy. Disney is now allegedly demanding that star Rachel Zegler pay back a significant portion of her compensation in an effort to offset massive financial losses tied to the ill-fated remake. According to multiple insiders, executives at the Walt Disney Company claim Zegler's public statements.
Even if everything worked perfectly, it would have been almost impossible for this movie to succeed, because you're comparing it to one of the most beloved films of all time and a truly groundbreaking movie.
And perceived disavowal of the 1937 animated classic played a major role in the film's underperformance, and that the studio has every intention of recouping at least a fraction of the funds it invested. This latest development underscores how fraught the relationship between Disney and its one-time leading lady has become, and highlights the broader implications as well as key points that resonate with how this issue impacts stakeholders, demonstrating the lengths to which a major brand might go when a high-profile project spirals into a fiasco. From the outset, Disney's live-action, Snow White, seems destined to be a gem in the studio's growing catalog of modernized fairy tale classics. For a time, industry experts predicted a box office smash, particularly given the star power of up-and-comers like Rachel Zegler, alongside the internationally known Gal Gadot. Yet the reality proved far grimmer than anyone anticipated. Fans openly criticized the film's heavy-handed messaging, the sidelining or reimagining of the dwarfs, and an overall departure from the whimsy that defined the 1937 original masterpiece. Critics, meanwhile, lambasted what they saw as a muddled script. Rumors of backstage conflicts emerged even before the movie hit theaters, setting the stage for a confluence of issues when the poor reviews crystallized into subpar ticket sales. The entire production swiftly became a cautionary tale. It also highlights the broader implications and underlines key points that resonate with how this issue impacts stakeholders and the audience alike, emphasizing just how volatile the reception to a beloved property's remake can be in the social media age. While controversies around modernizing classic stories aren't new, the Snow White remake faced unprotected, ended levels of scrutiny.
The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Say it louder so your other eye can hear you.
Early promotional material appeared to diminish core elements of the original's charm, like the uplifting songs and innocent romance, in favor of self-consciously updated plot points. Fans from multiple generations felt alienated, arguing that the film was unrecognizable compared to the source material that launched Disney's animated empire as the backlash escalated.
That was the budget before promotion was $270.
Okay.
The promotion budget I just read was $230.
So $500 million.
Correct.
Early promotional material appeared to diminish core elements of the original's charm, like the uplifting songs and innocent romance, in favor of self-consciously updated plot points. Fans from multiple generations felt alienated, arguing that the film was unrecognizable compared to the source material that launched Disney's animated empire as the backlash escalated.
No, the people who you need to entertain, the people who you need to serve, the people who pay your salary.
This also highlights the broader implications and underlines key points that resonate with how this issue impacts stakeholders and the audience alike, suggesting that balancing progress with tradition remains a daunting challenge for heritage brands. The aftermath has proved catastrophic for Disney's bottom-line industry. Estimates suggest the Snow White remake's cumulative losses could be in the hundreds of millions, factoring in production costs, marketing expenses, and an avalanche of unsold merchandise. Moreover, licensing deals and tie-in promotions were reportedly canceled or drastically curtailed once the film's negative reception became undeniable, faced with such a staggering deficit. Disney has, according to insiders, turned a critical eye toward the start, once touted as a shining example of its inclusive, forward-thinking ethos. Enter the so-called refund demand, wherein the studio is said to be exploring legal avenues to recover part of Zegler's multi-million-dollar fee.
You don't particularly see people who, look like me or are me playing roles like that. So it was definitely, when it got announced,
White! He wasn't a stalker, by the way.
Thing that was like trending on Twitter for days because all of the people were angry.
Alleging that her contractual obligations to promote Disney's brand positively were not fulfilled, it also highlights the broader implications and underlines key points that resonate with how this issue impacts stakeholders and the audience alike. Spotlighting the question of whether studios can or should penalize actors for marketing strategies that backfire. The notion of a studio demanding money back from a leading performer is practically unheard of in contemporary Hollywood.
It's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White.
That laugh.
That is
not going to be saved by
You
the
wrote
prince.
it?
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be.
While there have been instances of pay-to-play contracts or salary reductions tied to a film's box office results, the idea of an outright refund points to the severity of the fallout from this particular project. Sources say Disney's legal team is combing through Zegler's contract for any clauses regarding public endorsements, brand representation, or promotional conduct that might have been breached by her commentary.
It was supposed to come out like a year and a half ago, and then we went after them so hard because of their variety of ridiculous sins that they actually went into full-scale reshoots on Snow White when we announced that we had a competitor.
Industry veterans note this kind of enforcement is rarely pursued to such extremes. Usually a studio will simply choose not to rehire a star for future projects if there's dissatisfaction rather than directly demanding financial redress. Nevertheless, these are not usual circumstances, and Disney's protracted struggles with franchise misfires in recent years, including tepid Marvel spin-offs and other underwhelming live-action remakes, have put pressure on executives to find scapegoats and limit financial damage.
Kind of a Disney magic that had depth, that had absolute, it was riveting, and it's based, of course, on a Brothers Grimm story. And
it also highlights the broader implications and underlines key points that resonate with how this issue impacts stakeholders and the audience alike, illustrating how even iconic studios can shift from supportive collaborators to unrelenting creditors if a film's performance is disastrous enough. Adding to the drama, Rachel Zegler has in various forums countered that her interview soundbites were taken out of context and that Disney itself pushed for a modern reimagining in promotional materials.
And this started with the movie star Rachel Zegler, who I believe would be categorized as a loudmouth dope.
Leaked marketing directives indeed suggest that the cast was strongly encouraged to contrast the new movie with the outdated gender dynamics of the old one. If that's the case, Zegler might argue that she was following corporate instructions rather than going rogue. Furthermore, her supporters point to the broader creative missteps that haunted the film, ranging from last-minute script rewrites to confused brand messaging as the real culprits behind its failure. In their view, focusing blame on an actress's interview answers obscures the root problem: a fractured division at the highest levels of Disney's production and marketing apparatus. This also highlights the broader implications and underlines key points that resonate with how this issue impacts stakeholders and the audience alike, reinforcing that the downfall of a big-budget tentpole rarely hinges on a single factor or individual.
As an actor, you don't get to dictate anything. You don't get to dictate if a film actually happens. You don't get to dictate when it is shot, how it is shot, if you can ever speak about it to the public. You are simply just there to show up and say your lines and look the way they want you to look.
Delgado, who portrayed the evil queen, remains notably less entangled in the controversy, likely because she sidestepped questions about the film's direction or legacy in a more diplomatic manner. That approach, combined with her global stardom and proven track record, appears to have inoculated her from the same level of scrutiny. Meanwhile, Zegler's relative openness and willingness to characterize the original masterpiece as archaic has seemingly left her vulnerable to a firestorm of criticism.
This path that I'm taking right now is the path that Rachel Zegler should have taken instead of just running her mouth for the last 3 years, which we are going to get into now.
And now potentially severe legal ramifications. Observers note that Godot, if anything, has emerged unscathed. She continues to book prominent roles in other franchises, whereas Zegler faces rumors of blacklisting and mounting professional challenges. This also highlights the broader implications as it underlines key points that resonate with how this issue impacts stakeholders and the audience alike, emphasizing that in Hollywood, how a star navigates PR minefields can decisively impact their future standing, especially when a film collapses under public condemnation. On the legal front, experts raise important questions about whether Disney genuinely has standing to demand a refund, although contracts often contain morality clauses or stipulations about cooperating with marketing plans. Most legal agreements stop short of penalizing an actor for negative audience reactions, especially when the specifics of what qualifies as harmful commentary can be subjective. To build a viable case, Disney's counsel would likely need to show a direct, provable correlation between Zegler's remarks and the multi-million-dollar losses, an argument some lawyers think is tenuous at best. Beyond the contractual fine print, there's also the court of public opinion. If the story of a refund demand gains traction, Disney risks looking vindictive, further eroding its squeaky clean image. This also highlights the broader implications and underlines key points that resonate with how this issue impacts stakeholders and the audience alike, hinting that a protracted legal battle could generate more reputational damage than the film's initial failure behind closed doors. The fiasco has reportedly shaken morale within Disney's executive ranks. While the studio still commands a broad portfolio of lucrative properties, including theme parks, streaming services, and other film franchises, stakeholders worry that mismanaging something as foundational as Snow White might signal deeper cultural or strategic issues. The remake was meant to anchor a wave of future, reinterpretations demonstrating that Disney could fuse time-honored stories with contemporary themes. Instead, it's now a glaring example of how easily that approach can backfire. Tensions among executives have spilled into the open, with some blaming marketing and production for straying too far from tradition, and others pointing to the cast. Media missteps. This fractious environment has only heightened the potential for finger-pointing, culminating in the studio's new drive to hold Zegler financially accountable. It also highlights the broader implications and underlines key points that resonate with how this issue impacts stakeholders and the audience alike, suggesting a possible recalibration of Disney's entire live-action strategy, one that could pivot away from radical reimagining toward more faithful retellings. Rachel Zegler, for her part, has signaled that she's unwilling to shoulder sole responsibility for the film's meltdown. Close associates say she's prepared to disclose receipts, both literal and metaphorical, should Disney escalate its attempt to retrieve money from her. That includes emails, texts, or other documents proving she was merely echoing official talking points about modernizing Snow White. If such evidence exists, a legal battle could unearth damaging revelations about internal studio politics, inconsistencies in marketing directives, or even sabotage among competing factions. The spectacle of a headline-grabbing court case would undoubtedly pique public interest, but it could also cause incalculable harm to the Disney brand. This also highlights the broader implications and underlines key points that resonate with how this issue impacts stakeholders and the audience alike, reminding us that high-stakes litigation can yield unpredictable outcomes even for a powerhouse like Disney. Many fans have flocked to social media to defend Zegler. They argue that no single actor can sink or save a motion picture, especially one burdened with complex corporate agendas and heavy fan expectations. Others see her as a convenient scapegoat, a means for Disney to appease shareholders by portraying the flop as a result of bad press as opposed to flawed creative choices. Yet a vocal segment remains adamant that Zegler's language around the beloved 1937 film was disrespectful, fueling the negative reaction. They side with Disney's rumored demand for restitution, contending that if an actor publicly undermines the brand, the studio is entitled to recoup losses. This clash of perspectives underscores how polarizing the conversation remains, and it also highlights the broader implications and underlines key points that resonate with how this issue impacts stakeholders and the audience alike, revealing sharp divisions about how updates to iconic stories should be handled and who bears the brunt if fans reject the result. Meanwhile, the fiasco has spurred a broader reflection in the film industry about how best to approach remaking cultural touchstones. Disney has long banked on revivals of its animated classics from Cinderella to The Little Mermaid to reliably draw both older fans and new audiences. However, the meltdown around Snow White suggests that fervent nostalgia can morph into fierce protectiveness. If a remake strays too far from the originals, cherished DNA, with rising production costs and sky-high expectations, even the tiniest miscalculation in tone or messaging can lead to a tidal wave of backlash. Meanwhile, the fiasco has spurred a broader reflection in the film industry about how best to approach remaking cultural touchstones. Disney has long banked on revivals of its animated classics from Cinderella to The Little Mermaid to reliably draw both older fans and new audiences. However, the meltdown around Snow White suggests that fervent nostalgia can morph into fierce protectiveness. If a remake strays too far from the originals, cherished DNA, with rising production costs and sky-high expectations, even the tiniest miscalculation in tone or messaging can lead to a tidal wave of backlash.